next delightful that from the great success that it's been here in Egypt, the AIIB Annual Meeting will move next year to Uzbekistan. How excited I am for that. My name is Curtis Chin. I had been the U.S. Ambassador to the Asian Development Bank, where a highlight of my time there was representing the United States at the AIIB Annual Meeting in Uzbekistan in 2010. I think it was the 43rd AIIB Annual Meeting. So clearly AIIB is ahead of the game because it only took 9 times to get to Uzbekistan next year. We're going to begin today's program with some remarks from Konstantin from the AIIB. And so I'm going to have him come on up. He'll share some comments, get us thinking, and then we'll bring our panel up on stage. Konstantin? Please.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Curtis. Your Excellency, Minister of Investments, Industry and Trade of Republic of Uzbekistan, Your Excellency, Minister Kudratov, partners, clients, ladies and gentlemen. I have a long list for address. But the audience is pretty small, so I can only just say friends, dear friends. So it is my great pleasure to open the session on this important subject of water and LNG challenge in Uzbekistan and significant role it plays in achieving sustainable development in this country. Uzbekistan is the most populous country in Central Asia, and it faces a complex set of challenges in the water-energy nexus. Water scarcity, climate crises, energy security, high carbon intensity are among the most pressing issues. Uzbekistan is downstream riparian, relying on the Amurdarya and Sirdarya rivers for its water needs, including electricity production, irrigation, and drinking water. Uzbekistan is considered among the most water-stressed countries in the world by the World Resources Institute. Despite the recent progress, the current Uzbekistan power supply mix is heavily dependent on fossil fuels and is one of the most carbon-intensive economies in the region. Its energy demand is expected to rise by more than 30% by 2030, with expected strong economic growth and increasing urbanization. Irrigation and drinking water sectors are important users of water resources and consumers of energy and can foster cost and GSG saving through increased water and energy efficiency. Pumping water for irrigation and drinking water is a major energy consumer. Energy costs account for 30 to 50% of the operating expenses of water companies in the region. The water supply distribution infrastructure is fairly old and suffers high water losses, often exceeding 40% of supplied water. While improving the efficiency of existing system can reduce costs and GSG emissions, access remains the important challenge in Uzbekistan. More than 1/4 of population continues to lack access to water supply, and access to sewage system remains limited to key urban centers. For Uzbekistan, water scarcity is a pressing challenge, and already today, according to United Nations SHICC reporting, Uzbekistan freshwater withdrawal is above its available renewable freshwater resources, signaling critical water stress, which is expected to increase further with the climate change. With more than 90% of water utilized for agricultural irrigation purposes, it is critical to enhance the water efficiency and energy efficiency of water management. The transboundary water dependence, together with the status of the double landlocked country, further underlies the importance of sound water resource management and efficiency in water use. Droughts and floods became more frequent with climate change, highlighting the need for climate-resilient infrastructure development in this country. The Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank stands ready to support Uzbekistan in addressing the water energy challenges. We recognize the importance of transitioning to renewable energy sources and improving water resource management while increasing access to improved water services. AIIB has already undertaken several projects in Uzbekistan that exemplify our commitment to addressing these challenges. In Bukhara, for instance, AIIB is supporting the government to comprehensively increase access to water supply and sanitation services and to increase the service quality. Water supply and sanitation need to be addressed in the integrated approach to maximize benefit to population and to protect the environment. By reducing water losses and rolling out water metering at the household level, these projects are making significant strides to ensure availability of safe and reliable water to the Uzbek population. The introduction of technology-enabled infrastructure allows to establish a water balance, optimize operations, and reduce water losses. This not only improves the efficiency of water production and distribution, but also reduces the energy footprint associated with the water production. Every cubic meter of water which is not lost doesn't need to be produced and pumped. Two phases of our Bukhara water project invest $630 million and benefit 1.2 million residents in Bukhara region, providing them with access to safe water supply and wastewater services. In addition to Bukhara region, AIIB is in partnership with the World Bank is also supporting increased access to water supply and sanitation in 7 other regions in Uzbekistan under our joint rural infrastructure development projects and the middle-sized cities project, further contributing to the government's objective of universal access to pipe water supply and rollout of sewage systems. Furthermore, water supply and sanitation investments amounting to $400 million are under preparation for Khwarezm region and Republic of Karakalpakstan. We are also preparing investments in the size of $220 million in resource management and irrigation in Tashkent region. We're working with the Ministry of Water Resources to increase the water and energy efficiency of irrigation system and introduce digital technology for automatic data transmission and control, reducing the water losses and increasing the energy efficiency of water supply and irrigation contributes to the reduction of the pressure on Uzbekistan energy system. Private sector has a significant role to play in increasing Uzbekistan energy generation capacity and transition to low carbon economy. At AIIB, we aim to increase our private sector financing to 50% by 2030. This is one of our targets and the most challenging targets in our corporate strategy. In 2021, we approved a €100 million loan in support of 1.5 gigawatt Sirdarya CCGT plant developed by Aqua Power as the lead sponsor. With gas as a transitional fuel, the project adds to Uzbekistan high-efficiency power generation, grid stability, and energy reliability. The project replaces all the inefficient installed capacities in the region, which is in line with the long-term power sector decarbonization strategy of Uzbekistan and the Ministry of Energy plan for electricity supply up to 2030. The project was financed alongside with EBRD, OPIC Fund, and DEG, with commercial financing backed by MIGA. It was AIIB's first non-sovereign backed financing in Uzbekistan and today the largest IPP investment in the country. It sets an outstanding example of private sector investment in support of transition to a competitive energy sector. What is also important to note is that technology-enabled features of the project will also increase water use efficiency, helping to reduce water scarcity in the region, and that it is aggravated by the climate change. Uzbekistan made plans to promote renewable energy development with a target of providing renewable power of up to 15% of the generation mix by 2030. To progress towards this objective and to address its growing demand for energy, Uzbekistan began investing in solar and hydropower plants as an alternative to gas generation, and AIIB stands ready to support this transition. In April this year, we joined hands with several multilateral development institutions and provided, from our account, $83 million to support Masdar solar PV portfolio, comprising 3 solar PV projects in Samarkand, Jazakh, and Sharbat, with total combined capacity of 897 megawatts. The projects will also the first to be supported by 2 partnerships of the Energy Transition Accelerator Finance, ETAF, program by IRENA-led initiative to mobilize finance into the renewable projects in the developing countries. This project is one of the many good examples of how MDB can work together towards supporting member countries in achieving their energy supply and transition goals. Finally, AIIB plans to continue collaborating closely with Uzbekistan and the Central Asian members in addressing the key gaps in infrastructure finance across the water and energy sectors. We will continue serving our members and supporting them in their low-carbon development pathways by mobilizing private capital, financing green and technology-enabled infrastructure that is resilient to climate change and aligns with the sustainable development targets of our member countries. Uzbekistan is the founding member and a key partner of AIIB. Uzbekistan will be hosting the next annual meeting, and the handover ceremony between Egypt and Uzbekistan has just been concluded by our governor, and I'm pleased to see the minister as the panelist of this session, His Excellency Laziz Kudratov, Minister of Investment, Industry and Trade. With this, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to hand back to Curtis, and I wish all of us a productive discussion at this and other session of our annual meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Konstantin. A lot of food for thought, which I think our panelists will be following up on. Why don't I go ahead and have our panelists come join me up on the stage, and we'll get down to some discussion. And as time permits, we'll also have a couple questions from our audience, too. So thank you, and again, good morning to everyone on this panel. Again, as I noted earlier, what a delight it is to have the AIIB annual meeting move from Egypt to Uzbekistan. And we can see even from this panel how Uzbekistan is hands-on and getting things done because the governor for AIIB is even here participating with us. So thank you in particular, Your Excellency, but also representatives from the private sector and AIIB. To begin, for those of you who aren't yet blessed and been yet to Uzbekistan, when I tell people, I was there for the AIIB annual meeting, 2010, they're like, oh, that was old Uzbekistan. Now we have new Uzbekistan. Your Excellency, there's, investment is beginning to flow in to Uzbekistan. Things are happening. I was wondering if you could share with us a little bit of a picture of what is going on there. This session in particular focuses on energy and water. I think many people will be also particularly interested in terms of some of the initiatives that Uzbekistan is doing with regards to the energy sector. And then I'll follow up with a little bit about water. But give us a taste of amazing Uzbekistan and what is happening there now.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. It's a great pleasure to attend this event and to inform about the developments in our country. So basically the transformations in Uzbekistan has started in 2017, then the President Mirziyoyev came into power, and since then he managed to transform the country, made it open for foreign capital and businesses. Before that, many of you may know that Uzbekistan de facto was the closed country for foreign businesses. There were issues related to currency convertibility, profit repatriation was a big headache. So since 2017, these issues are issues of the past. And today, as a result of these reforms, we see significant growth of investments. The foreign direct investment flow into Uzbekistan has tripled compared to 2017. The GDP, as a result, has increased by 1.5 times. Industrial growth reached 40%, and we see the same high dynamics in exports, in services, in other areas. All of these are the proof of the efficiency of the reforms that are implemented in Uzbekistan. And of course, we do not stop at what we have achieved so far. We have adopted a new strategy, Uzbekistan 2030, which envisions further growth of our economy. We have set an ambitious target to double our GDP by 2030. For that, we have to attract at least $100 billion of foreign direct investment. So this is not an easy task, but we are committed, and we have action plan, we have roadmaps, we have specific ministries, agencies that are responsible for achieving all the goals that are set in this strategy. Talking about the power sector, I can say that this is the crucial element of economic growth of Uzbekistan. As my friend Konstantin mentioned, that we will continue to attract capital, both domestic as well as private, to this sector. Over the last 3 years, we managed to bring private capital from different countries to support energy development, mostly energy generation in Uzbekistan. And in order to facilitate private sector investment, we have made several concrete steps. So I will very briefly mention the measures that the government has taken. First is privatization. So first in the history of Uzbekistan, we started to privatize state-owned power generation companies. So the first agreement were signed in May this year with the UAE Mubadala company. It's a major energy company in United Arab Emirates, and they have acquired the Talimarjan power plant. We have concrete program of privatization of our other state-owned energy generation facilities. And of course, this brings not only capital, but the efficiency, proper management, and more predictable energy sector in Uzbekistan. Second, what we did, we have improved the legal framework in order to support presence of foreign capital in Uzbekistan. We have adopted dedicated investment law in Uzbekistan, which also encourage private investment, protect investors' rights, and provide more transparent and predictable business environment. Third step that we did, we started a tariff reform and cost recovery mechanisms. We have implemented a gradual tariff reform process aimed at ensuring cost recovery and attracting private investments. So the idea towards this reform is to make sure that the electricity tariffs are aligned with the real market prices, and this will also allow us to minimize the financial losses of energy generation companies in Uzbekistan. Fourth step was to put dedicated efforts to increase the share of renewables in our generation mix. By 2030, solar, wind, and hydro share in our energy generation portfolio should reach 30%. And in order to achieve this, we have introduced feed-in tariffs and power purchase agreements for renewable energy projects. And we also adopted separate regulatory framework to support renewable energy sector development in Uzbekistan. And of course, related to this, we have also introduced mechanisms to support public-private partnerships. This is also important mechanisms to attract foreign investments and expertise. We have set a target to attract capital to develop at least 15 gigawatt of solar and wind power stations in Uzbekistan by 2030. We already have projects that are operational. The largest solar power stations in Central Asia are being operated now by Masdar UAE, by Total Energies from France. We have projects that are coming up and will be launched this year, which are operated and built by Aqua Power from Saudi Arabia. We have partners from China, from Turkey, and other countries that are actively investing into renewable sector in Uzbekistan. And the last but not least, the government provides incentives for foreign investors in power sector. We provide tax holidays, customs duties exemption, and other mechanisms to make sure that operations of foreign investors in power sector in Uzbekistan are successful. So maybe I'll stop here because we are limited in time. Just wanted to say that the government is committed to make an energy power sector attractive for foreign capital. So we stand ready to work with new companies who are interested in doing business in Uzbekistan. Thank you.
No, thank you. I mean, clearly, at one point in my life, I was like in the advertising world. I would put open for business. Uzbekistan really is doing a lot of the, reforms and policies that I think many of the multilateral development banks, not just AIIB, the World Bank used to put out its doing business report, and they would point out some of the rules and regulations and things that also need to change to ensure that private capital flows in. Throughout these 2 days, there's of course so much talk about infrastructure, but also about the key issue, which is the infrastructure financing gap. And I often say that, governments really kind of know what they need to do, but sometimes there's political reasons, or how do I make sure the population is with me if they're thinking, well, maybe my prices are going to go up in some areas. But for things to be sustainable, we talk about infrastructure for tomorrow. These things need to be put in place. So kudos to Uzbekistan. Before I go to some of our other panelists, is it a similar story in the water sector? They're so related in terms of some of the issues. And when I think about Uzbekistan's history, the Soviet era, we'll talk more about water pumps and the connection of electricity and how I get my water moving. Are these same reforms and efforts taking place in the water sector? And are you also seeing foreign investors interested, if not already coming in, to think about opportunities there?
Water sector is something that we are developing as well. Of course, it is not as attractive for foreign direct investments as energy sector yet, but we have made first steps towards bringing foreign capital, direct investments to water supply, water treatment, and waste treatment in Uzbekistan. We have French companies who already operate in this sector. For example, Suez has started project on modernization of water supply in the capital of Uzbekistan, in Tashkent. We working with UAE company from Abu Dhabi on waste management, water waste management facilities in Uzbekistan. These are the first projects that we started to implement, and we believe that the major step that would make this sector attractive for foreign capital is also the tariff regulations, because the currently tariffs for water supply, water treatment are subsidized by the state, and we should also take gradual approach towards these policies. But the government is committed, and we will do it step by step. Nevertheless, we invest a significant amount of capital to water infrastructure, and these investments are backed by the state budget and MDBs. And here I would like to mention the role of AIIB, who does specific projects. As Konstantin mentioned, we have projects in Bukhara, we have projects in Karakol, Pakistan, Khorasan region. The portfolio of water projects in Uzbekistan now exceeds $1 billion. Of course, this is not enough, because current current coverage with the drinking water supply in Uzbekistan is 74–75%. Only 5–6 years ago, it was less than 60%. And by 2026, we have set a target to reach 90% of water supply, drinking water supply in Uzbekistan. And here we are actively working with AIIB to make sure that this target is achieved, not only through sovereign-backed financing, but also by introducing PPP mechanisms in the water sector, bringing technologies, bringing know-how to make sure that this sector will be also attractive for private foreign capital as well. So we are working here very actively with the AIB.
No, thank you for that. When I was on the board of the Asian Development Bank, people would always say, don't you do the same as the World Bank or this multilateral bank? Aren't you all like stepping over each other? And they would talk about coordination. But the key evaluator is you, the governors of these institutions. Are these institutions serving you well? So good to hear about the partnership with AIIB. AIIB, World Bank, they'll all be like, we are the partner of choice. So you need to think through what you do to balance them out to ensure that things move forward. And I think all of these institutions also recognize the importance of private capital, right? It cannot all be like more loans or grants even in some countries from these multilateral development banks. Private capital is also a critical driver for these. I want to take a step back and actually go to kind of really the policy side. And so it's interesting, at the beautiful museum here in Sharm El Sheikh, I ran into who I would like to be our next speaker. If you could share a little bit about kind of the bigger picture, as you think about policy, so, and of course it'll apply to Uzbekistan, but as you think about that nexus of water, of energy, what comes to mind as you think about kind of the cases that you've already seen during your time with the AIIB? Kwan, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Curtis, for the question. Maybe I can touch upon this question from a policy strategy point of view, and also mention about the corporate strategy and AIIB's sector strategy. So we have corporate strategy, we also have sector strategy, and all of those strategies are designed to work together to provide a holistic solution. So AIIB's corporate strategy defines AIIB's vision and mission, and also our client-driven business model. Our corporate strategy very much stress the sustainability of all of our financing in infrastructure projects. So sustainability includes economic, financial sustainability, and environmental sustainability, and social sustainability. And also, we are required to add value in one or more of 4 thematic priorities, so which include the green infrastructure, and the green infrastructure very much include climate mitigation, adaptation, and environmental protection, and as well as cross-border connectivity and regional cooperation, technology-enabled infrastructure, and private capital mobilization. And then our sector strategies actually embedded all of those principles and thematic priorities and ask us to deliver the projects that achieve the objective and add value in one or more of those 4 thematic priorities. So you mentioned about energy-water nexus. This is actually very much the case in those 2 sectors. Our water sector strategy very much promotes a holistic solution and promote integrated water resource management. And the energy sector strategy also very much advocate collaborative approach to provide a holistic solution as well. So for example, increase renewable energy and energy efficiency measures to address the issues embedded in the water and increase efficiency of water usage. And for example, in water desalination. And at the same time, we are not working on project in isolation. We're working on project very much bearing in mind of the interaction between the different sectors, aiming to promote collaboration and aiming to capture the value of cross-sectoral synergies and between the different sectors, and especially when it comes to energy and water. And very happy that we have been doing several projects in working very closely with Uzbekistan government and also working with private sector infrastructure developers in the country to support the country's development objective and their development goals. And we are also working now with the government towards a multi-year pipeline for sovereign-backed financing. And we are scaling up our efforts also in the non-sovereign-backed financing. So that sort of nexus between the sectors of water and energy are very much in our mind. Promotion of this collaborative and holistic approach to provide a solution very much in this thinking and in developing our pipeline in the country. Thank you.
2 follow-ups. The minister also mentioned the importance of technology, and I was thinking about kind of, in these sectors, the technology is also evolving, and I've heard others at AIIB talk about technology-enabled improvements or technology-driven technology or driven infrastructure. Does that apply here as you think about that bigger strategy and things you're involved with water and electricity?
Yeah, exactly. I just mentioned that in our corporate strategy, the technology-enabled infrastructure is one of the key thematic priorities that we are required to add value where applicable. So we very much recognize the importance of technology and the adoption and the dissemination of the technology in infrastructure sector to promote the efficiency, resilience of the infrastructure, and also to address the quality, to deliver the high quality of infrastructure projects. Saying that, for example, in Uzbekistan, the low carbon transition from the fossil fuel to more renewable, we recognize it will lead to saving of the water. But at the same time, we also recognize the water saving can be offset by higher water requirements from other low emission technologies, such as the water for irrigation in biofuel feedstock, and also the water cooling that used in the gas power plant. Therefore, we want to, and we aim to promote the cooling, the water cooling technology, but also the efficient water pumping technology. VP Konstantin also just mentioned about the Sardaya CCGT gas project. And that project actually, by using this zero liquid discharge technology combined with induced draft mechanical cooling towers, that has led to reduced water abstraction demand by over 40%. At the same time, recognizing importance of technology adaptation and dissemination infrastructure sector, AIIB during this annual meeting, we are also launching our InfraTech platform. So this platform aims to promote the use of technology in achieving efficiency and resilience of infrastructure projects by knowledge sharing, and also by connecting technology solution provider together with other stakeholders, including infrastructure developers, clients, the infrastructure project owners. So together to promote the high quality infrastructure projects. Thank you.
One last thing before we go to Uzbek. The other, I think, big news that I saw coming out of here yesterday was the climate action plan for the AIIB. You know, if I were a governor, I see all these plans, like, what does it mean for Uzbekistan? You know, I see these things, we're Paris aligned. We have a green infrastructure initiative, and now the climate action plan. How does that play out if I were Uzbekistan or any of the member countries who are borrowing? What does it mean for them? Is there more allocations to climate related? Are you looking at water and energy from a climate hat now also? So when I think about the climate action plan, how will that play out with regards to some of the I hope more than rhetoric that we're already hearing about green infrastructure?
Yeah, so and as also just mentioned, the green and also climate is quite critical and is recognized as a key thematic priority in our corporate strategy. And such recognition of addressing the importance of climate change and also green infrastructure actually quite embedded, not just in our corporate strategy, but in our environmental social framework, environmental social policy requirements, the Paris alignment commitment, but also in our climate action plan. So when it comes to the project and support the government to achieve its infrastructure development objective and also sustainable growth goals, we actually prioritize our investment along those the thematic priority, especially helping the country in addressing climate change when it comes to both energy and water sector. Make sure that whatever projects that we are going to finance, they are in line with the country's long-term development objective, in line with the country's climate action, the climate ambition, and also in line with the AIIB's own commitment to Paris alignment, and also to our the water and energy sector strategies that also apply in our due diligence when it comes to project preparation and also during the implementation, and that make sure that we work together with the country, with the stakeholders in the country to achieve their climate ambition and also to deliver AIIB's own climate ambition. Thank you.
Does that mean more money is coming?
Yes, for sure, more money, but at the same time, mobilizing more investors into the country. Right?
You know, it's always, when you're on the board of these institutions, you know, it's like, lend more, lend faster. But, you know, we want it to be impactful. but also, are you like double counting? And then, no, it's co-financing. So as I think about all that an AIIB can do to mobilize capital, a key part will really be also private capital. And so I wanted to go next to Odubek. You're great here on this panel because you're not just like former, Vice Minister of Finance and now advisor to the Ministry of Finance on public-private partnerships, but you yourselves are now in the private sector, CEO and co-founder of InfraAsia Capital. I was wondering, as you hear all this about water and electricity, power, what are you thinking? What is the reality? What are you seeing as Uzbekistan moves forward? What more can an AIIB do? And how are you feeling right now with how things have progressed?
Well, thank you very much, Curtis, for the question, and thanks to AIIB for inviting me to this panel. I think it's a very, very important panel. Before I answer your question, if I perhaps just take a step back in terms of the background of the panel, water energy challenge in the Central Asia, because water energy challenge is not just Uzbekistan's problem, it's the Central Asian problem. And we are in the region where ice caps have melted 30% in the last 50 years, and this is accelerating. We are in the region where the climate change is happening twice as fast as the global average. So AIIB's policies and other IFI's policies in terms of climate challenge or climate-friendly policies, or actually mitigation of those impacts of the climate change is real in Uzbekistan. It's not a theory, it's actually what we see with our own eyes. And in terms of the renewables, Uzbekistan has been sort of on 5th gear or 6th gear or 7th gear, whatever gear you have now, in terms of attracting investments. As the minister mentioned, the goals, from almost nothing, 6%, 5% of the hydro into 30% within the next 7 years is an amazing sort of goal to achieve. And this acceleration is quite important for Uzbekistan, especially in the face that Uzbekistan is becoming gas importing country, which is a big change in our energy self-sufficiency. It's a big change. Secondly, as mentioned earlier, the Central Asia's water energy challenge, from the previous, during Soviet times, two countries who were sitting in Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan, who are actually sources of water, they usually generate electricity using hydro mostly, and we used to generate electricity using gas, and we used to trade each other, which had stopped in the first 20, 25 years of our independence. Now it's renewed again. This is quite an important achievement spearheaded by President Mirziyoyev to basically become sort of making sure that, showing this leadership in Central Asia, showing that without this cooperation, we cannot have proper energy security in Uzbekistan. And as you all know, for any renewables that we build in the country, we need to have base load. And sometimes it's easier, instead of building the base load in Uzbekistan, but buy from one of the neighbors who are producing this energy. And now Uzbekistan is not only resisting, but actually helping some of the large hydro power plants in our neighboring countries, which is a very important shift in the policy. And this is quite good for the region, for the Central Asian region as well. So now back to your question in terms of the private sector. Minister already mentioned multi-billion-dollar investments provided by significant investors from the Middle East, from Europe, especially France. They're very active. China now, and my firm is mainly working with some of them, and also new investors who want to come to Uzbekistan, and they're quite interested with the market capacity, because if you look at the map and if you look at the actual where there's quite a lot of solar potential, and if you look at the other countries around the region, Uzbekistan presents these unique opportunities to investors, given that there is no such thing as overcapacity. There will not be such thing as overcapacity in Uzbekistan. We can always sell it to our southern neighbors, which we do at the present as well. So from private sector perspective, energy sector provides quite a lot of opportunities. Now, I also want to mention the water sector. Vice President mentioned in his opening remarks about the water pumps, which is used in irrigation purposes. And in Uzbekistan, 90% of the water that we receive is used for agriculture purposes. And majority of this water will be pumped up so that we can use it for basically agriculture, which is food security, which is important raw materials for our industry, and so on and so forth. It's very, very important. And these pump stations use around 10% of Uzbekistan's generated electricity, which is quite significant. So, and these pumps, around 85% of them are 30 years or older. So these were installed during Soviet period, and they're very energy inefficient. And your question earlier about the technology, that's where we can have a solution where we can basically bring the new technology, and simply by adjusting this available, some of the pumps are very large compared to what's available in terms of the water. So basically replacing this technology, which is a capital intensive issue, but this will save 30 to 40% of energy that some of these pump stations are using. So in the context of Uzbekistan, where this sector is already using 10%, even if probably you get half of them replaced with the private sector capital, this will mean quite a significant available power capacity to the rest of the economy, people. And that's something that we are also trying to sort of pitch together with investors, because this is where, as the minister mentioned, this is where the government is providing subsidies. This is where obviously hundreds of millions of dollars are spent each year just to pump water from place A to place B. And if you make it more efficient, then obviously it will be much cheaper from energy perspective as well. And this is interesting for investors. And this is, I guess, the starting point, one of the starting points of the private sector engagement in the water sector. But I think as we go further, I'm hoping that there will be more and more involvement in the private sector again. Going back to the tariffs that was mentioned, nowadays, again, subsidized by the government. But once the tariffs are more or less liberal, whether it's for drinking water or for irrigation purposes, then I think there will be more and more interest from private sector in water sector as well.
Tariffs, though, are a very touchy issue because you need the population to support these reforms that will ultimately ensure infrastructure is sustainable. But if all I know is that my water costs more, my power costs more, maybe I don't want those changes so quickly right now. As you advise the ministry on public-private partnerships, is there a wish list, or you've got to phase in things? If institutional investors are watching us and they're thinking about, hey, I want to think about Uzbekistan, and they read everything, they talk to consultants here. What is it that you think that the government really needs to prioritize over these next 3 to 5 years for greater public-private partnership from the private sector perspective side?
Thank you. I mean, this is a great question. I'm not only advising the minister on public-private partnership, but I'm also advising on public debt, so sustainability and ratings. So not all of them, fiscal risks coming from the PPPs. I used to manage debt management office as well during my previous tenure in the Ministry of Finance. Not every time they come together. Sometimes you do more PPPs, public-private partnership projects. This means there's a lot more weight on the government's shoulders. So of course investors would like to face the government. Of course investors would like this government support agreements coming signed by the Ministry of Economy and Finance, or availability payments, or off-taker being the government. Investors would love that. However, we need to also think about the fiscal sustainability as well. Some of the PPPs represent a direct liability of the government. Social PPPs like hospitals, schools, that we started already, some health centers and roads as well, comes directly from the government budget. And some PPPs represent contingent liabilities like energy. Mostly it's contingent liability. And contingent liability in many countries around the world has become real liability of the government, because sometimes those, PPAs or other types of long-term agreements do not really, prices change and things change in the 5, 10, 15-year period, and becomes a huge cost burden for the government in much more advanced countries as well. And therefore, my advice to the government has always been being prudent. When signing PPPs, making sure that fiscal costs are properly assessed. And during my time, we have implemented public PPP fiscal risk assessment methodology together with the IMF. And the government now is going through this implementation process where every single PPP will go through that PEFRAM methodologies so that Uzbekistan can afford what kind of commitments they're taking on board. So that's why my question has always will be, okay, tariffs are very tough, as you rightly mentioned. Our energy tariffs now, Minister mentioned it's being liberalized step by step, very important step by step. So I think other tariffs, again, we need to look at not just 1 or 2 year horizon, but maybe 5, 10, 15-year horizon when we liberalize. I think in future Uzbekistan at some point there will be water tariffs, even for irrigation. That's only when we can have efficiency in water usage. Again, VP Limitovsky mentioned about 30% water being lost between canals and when it reaches the farmer. And another 30% probably lost, if not more, by the farmer as well. But now farmer doesn't feel the difference because everything is paid by the government. So once we start calculating how much this is costing the government and making sure everyone is aware and communicate it well, and slowly but surely we will go to that place where, first of all, farmers and the irrigation itself will be more efficient in terms of water leakages. And secondly, farmer will be incentivized to install water-saving technologies. Nowadays, we have a lot of subsidies, but farmers are not rushing to do that. They're doing it, but not at the right speed that the government needs. So I think, again, tariff question is very political, and it has to be sequential with proper communication and proper strategy. Because energy tariffs was, for instance, I was in the government at that time, the government created a special wholesale energy, wholesale gas purchaser, because gas is quite an important part of the energy, and this receives subsidies. So that's basically the subsidies that government is paying, and that these subsidies are in billions of dollars. So once people have seen it, that billions of dollars of taxpayers' money are going to that energy subsidies, it has become more accepting that tariffs should increase. Otherwise, instead of building schools and hospitals and roads and other social infrastructure, we're simply subsidizing energy inefficiency in the country. So that's how I think the government should proceed in the longer term.
As we think about phasing things in, you made a terrific point that infrastructure is more than the technology and the physical. There will be an education component that people think differently about consumption, and they are part of the sustainability solution. But it won't happen overnight when I get things for free or get things at below cost. You're here to help me, government, not make my life more challenging. And so clearly, Jiankwan, on the policy side, it'll be interesting to see how you integrate that communications and education part of it all. Before I go to Zach, who's really our water energy urban expert, just one last question as you think about the AIIB specifically, and maybe the governor will also be interested, mobilizing private capital, public-private partnerships. In one of the sessions yesterday, Sri Mulyani from Indonesia, the minister there, talked about, in the session, about what more can the AIIB do? Concerns about currency. Is there a mismatch in terms of what we borrow and then, the income we're earning? As you think about what more AIIB can do for the private sector, for public-private partnership, is there something that comes to mind, or is just keep plugging away? Or if you had that magic wand, what would you have them do differently, more quickly, if we could?
I have very specific
all right.
recommendations to AIIB. Right now, they're very good. They're helping. They're even financing the private sector, not just public sector, but also private sector, which is very, very important. So keep doing that. Secondly, I think AIIB doesn't have the advisory yet on the PPPs, unless it's established already. Because ADB has it, IFC has it, and maybe one or two, EBRD has it. But I would also advise AIIB to set up such advisory units so that they can help the governments, including Uzbekistan, to prepare projects. Because one of the most important challenges for any developing country is project preparation. It costs millions of dollars. It takes time to do it properly, all the feasibility studies, technical assessment, environmental and social, you know, all these good things, you know, important things that needs to be done. And I think here, the actual support from banks like AIIB would be very, very important. And the third is regional cooperation. As mentioned, you know, the water energy challenge in the Central Asian region. I know the World Bank is trying to set up a kind of committee or something like that to increase the communication and transparency. But I think AIIB also is very well positioned to join this club, because, you know, them being closer to us, in terms of, you know, regional connectivity, this will be very, very helpful if they also involve more and more in that discussions. Because if those 5, 6 countries in Central Asia do not cooperate, we will never achieve energy efficiency, and we will never achieve, or we will never have, you know, those challenges that the climate change is presenting. We will never be able to prepare ourselves accordingly. You know, 20 years, 30, 50 years down the line, there will be much less water in Central Asia. And we need to know how to live with that. Not like today, but, you know, at that time. So we need to prepare. And AIIB's role is very, very crucial in that.
No, I think you have the right people on this panel to be listening to. We have the boss, the governor, right? I remember at ADB, I can't remember Uzbekistan, I think you're the 15th largest shareholder. Yeah, it's all about the shareholders, right? But it's the bosses that will drive change at AIIB, include the people running strategy and policy, and then people on really the front lines. Zach, I want to come to you. I mean, yesterday we were talking about the difference between some of the multilateral development banks. Do you have people in the field? I think it was the Turkish Minister of Finance yesterday talked about he would love to see AIIB people like in country. That isn't the model for AIIB right now, for good or for bad. You know, every institution has its own model, but that getting closer to where the challenge is, he believed, I believe, makes you smarter. You're not relying on a consultant's report. But as you know, expert, Zach, hear this panel, what are you thinking? You're like, I agree with everyone, or you know, water in particular, we're doing a great job at AIIB. What would you want to share as you listen to them and sharing, you know, not just about Uzbekistan, but that people who are listening to this and thinking about that's what AIIB can also do for my country, using Uzbekistan as a role model for moving forward. Zach.
Yeah, thank you, Curtis, for this question, and to previous speakers. I think I will touch upon quite a few of the points that also previous speakers have made. So when I think about this water energy challenge in Uzbekistan, first, Uzbekistan is a downstream riparian that is sharing its water resources with other upstream and downstream countries in the Sirdarya and Amudarya basins. And Uzbekistan is also considered a water stress country when we look at the United Nations reporting. And World Resource Institute considers it even among the most water stressed countries in 2040. So it is really in this context that sound water management and water efficiency is really critical for the country going forward. And I will talk about 2 challenges here in particular that have already been partly mentioned. So first one is really reducing water losses. Yeah. So much of the infrastructure, water infrastructure of Uzbekistan is inherited from the time before the independence. And for instance, the water distribution system, but also the irrigation systems are characterized by high water losses, oftentimes exceeding 40%. So pumping is very important here, as Odilbek said very well. A lot of that water is pumped for distribution, requiring a lot of energy and also costs. So now when we put this together with water losses, as VP Konstantin said, every cubic meter of water that is not lost does not need to be produced and also doesn't need to be pumped. So by investing in water infrastructure we can bring down water losses, we can also save energy, and we save costs, and we also save greenhouse gas emissions. So this is really very important. And this is important in drinking water supply, but it's also important on the irrigation side, because the irrigated agriculture sector is the biggest water user in the country, with about more than 90% of water resources being used for irrigation. So really the sector that has a strategic importance for the economy, also for employment, also for food security, can play a big role in increasing the efficiency in these areas. And so here it's important to really invest in bringing down water losses, so for instance the lining of canals, but also introducing digital solutions, monitoring remotely the water flows and controlling the infrastructure, so this can be done more efficiently, can play a role. So in a way, really AIIB's key priorities of green infrastructure and also technology-enabled infrastructure are very important here. Yeah, and we are doing that especially in Bukhara region right now on the water supply side, and we're also preparing investments in Karakal, Pakistan, and Khwarezm along the lines, about which I will talk a little bit later.
Yeah, I think though later is right now. And so, you mentioned water. I always remember, I think I was in Mongolia on a project and we were doing water systems. And the reality, it's cheaper in the long run if you put in place at the same time water supply as well as sanitation, right? Versus, oh, that's a different department that does sanitation. We'll do the water supply first. I know AIIB also takes pride in some of these lessons learned, and you had mentioned Bukhara. And I noted that project also had both water and sanitation, a little more holistic look at that. I was wondering if you could share a little bit on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So while we are also, when we look at the issues we just discussed in terms of water resource management, of course, access to water supply and sanitation services really remains key. Yeah, more than a quarter of the population doesn't have access to safely managed water. And in terms of sewerage, we are really looking just at access in the key urban centers, right? So in Bukhara specifically, which is a very important city, it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site and has a high importance for tourism. The government has decided to make this a pilot region for rolling out water supply and sewerage due to its importance, and AIIB is supporting Uzbekistan with that to really comprehensively address water supply and sanitation in an integrated approach. So why is this important? So whenever we bring more water, we increase access to water supply, and also we increase the service quality. Yeah, because those who are connected oftentimes don't have 24-hour water supply, they have intermittent water supply. So when we bring more water, there will be also more wastewater. So about 80% of the water that is supplied will come back as wastewater, and that also needs to be captured and treated adequately. So in Bukhara, we're doing exactly that. We're rolling out water supply measures hand in hand with the sewage system, looking at the entire water cycle, balancing that, and considering also the impact on the water resources. And in Bukhara, we do that in a two-phased approach, whereby the geographic priorities have been defined by the government based on really need and technical readiness. And the first phase of the Bukhara water activities is currently under implementation, and the second phase is expected to start soon. And I think it's important to highlight also what you said in terms of the learnings, right? We also talked about the tariffs and people's willingness to pay. So what happens with those households that today don't have access to piped water? So they rely on water delivered by tanker trucks. And this water is actually of uncertain quality, but it's also more expensive. So typically these households that rely on tanker trucks, they are poorer households, they have to pay more for potentially bad water. So this is something we don't, by a factor of 10 or so, or even more. So this is something we're seeing around the world, that generally poor people tend to pay more for bad water, right? And that's something we can address also with the rollout of the water supply infrastructure. And it's also to be noted that especially women and girls have the most burden from inadequate water supply because they're usually responsible for dealing with water in the household and taking care of sick family members. So rolling out this water and sanitation infrastructure brings high benefits. It saves cost, but also it improves the health of the people, and it saves time, especially for women and girls who can put their time then to more productive use.
No, thank you. You know, really, it's gone so quickly. We have like 5 to 6 minutes left. You know, I want to come back really to each of you as you've listened to each other. Is there something that you want to, you know, leave our audience online or in this room with to think about? You know, we have people who are investors. We got people from AIIB. Just different perspectives on things. Maybe Jaquan, first. Maybe I'll go with you in terms of policy issues, you know, kind of the bigger picture. When you hear all this, is there something that you want to underscore and convey that people take away from this session?
So I think the key words I really want to stress is that we're working in partnership and working really together with the government to understand the government development objective, the key priorities in infrastructure, in water and in energy, and really capture the value also of the synergy between the different sectors to support the government to achieve its development goals. And also very much the seminar applied to working with the private sector company, and as you just mentioned. And in doing so, also for AIIB to provide more value addition, including advisory service to PPP. And we will not provide advisory service just in standalone basis, but closely linked to the projects that we are going to finance. I think PPP is a very good example. And this also will in line with our objective to gradually increase our non-sovereign backed financing, because we want to achieve 50% of non-sovereign backed financing by 2030, the end of our corporate strategy period. We do need to forge this strategic partnership with credible and strong infrastructure sponsors, right? And in working together in this field. But at the same time, working with our peer MDBs, learn from them, working very closely with them, and working with other bilateral development financiers, because there is also mentioning about from yesterday's session, but also from this annual meeting, a lot of call for concessional financing, for blended financing, and we don't yet have our own concessional window, or at least we don't yet have contribution or a large concessional window. We are very much project financing bank. That requires us also to work with other partners or concessional resources providers, so that we provide also financing solution to our clients, which in this high interest rate environment and with a high debt, and very much in need for those kind of affordable terms.
You know, a key will be bringing on board all the governors, right? I mean, you will help shape how the AIIB continues to evolve. I was struck that AIIB really just opened operations physically in the UAE, right, in terms of another hub beyond from Beijing. Odebek, some closing thoughts or comments as we wrap up?
No, that's been a very interesting panel. Well, I'm biased because I'm in it, but at least for me it was very interesting to hear the thoughts of colleagues. I've met with several infrastructure investors during the course of the last couple of days, and most of them yet haven't invested in Uzbekistan. And they've heard from the governor, the minister, and I'm also trying to convince them. I think more to be done in terms of convincing investors, especially infrastructure investors, because they're there for long term, right? It's not like, you know, buy and sell, and no, it's and therefore I think, you know, whoever is watching, infrastructure investors, there is quite you know, significant opportunities in Uzbekistan as it opens up. And Uzbekistan is not only a gateway to Uzbekistan, it's also a gateway to Central Asia. So doing business in Uzbekistan also means that doing business with the neighbors of Uzbekistan, including 5 Central Asian countries. And I don't want to say it, but Afghanistan is also part of Central Asia. for water and energy purposes. Without Afghanistan, we cannot proceed. So that's why I think quite a significant opportunities exist in terms of producing in Uzbekistan and exporting to Afghanistan as well. So therefore, yes, message is quite clear. This is not only the challenge for the region, but also opportunity for investors, infrastructure investors who are looking to have stable returns for the investment.
No, I think you had mentioned earlier the importance of regional cooperation. You know, ADB is like drilled into my head. And there was always like a quiz where they give you all these acronyms and you got to figure out what is BIMPIAGA, Brunei, Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Economic Growth Area. What is CARIC? No one mentioned CARIC, you know, this Central Asia regional economic cooperation. You know, there are all these institutions, you know, how amazing that AIIB has moved forward really in 8 or 9 years to achieve what is achieved. But sometimes these regional groupings, the intent is there, but then other factors come into play as to whether they achieve something, but it's the beginning. Zach, any quick thoughts? And then I want to close with His Excellency the Minister.
Yes, thanks, Curtis. I want to come back to a phrase you used before. I think in investment operations, we really want to be a partner of choice to Uzbekistan in the years to come, you know, to help Uzbekistan to develop technology-enabled infrastructure and green infrastructure. And if I think about really the water sector, I think about 2 priorities here. One is with our project preparation special fund on a grant basis, we're supporting the government to prepare investments in Karakal, Pakistan, and Khorasan region, Western Uzbekistan, very water scarce region. Infrastructure is very important, and the topics we talked about before, bringing access, reducing water losses, and so on. But so are also the institutions in those 2 regions, so the regional water companies, and because they need to run these assets efficiently and sustainably. So we are also foreseeing a capacity building component under that, and we are actually in dialogue with the government of Switzerland to provide a grant to support these aspects, to strengthen these companies, especially in operational efficiency, the sustainability of operation, and also the climate resilience, those 3 areas. And then we are also entering the very important water irrigation sector. We are starting to work with Ministry of Water Resources. This will be the 2nd priority in the years to come, really to reduce water losses in this important sector that uses most of the water resources of Uzbekistan, creating digital enabled solutions for monitoring and control also of the systems, making them more efficient and also making them more resilient to climate change. So we're looking to prepare investments in Tashkent region, and Tashkent region also has some hilly terrain. And so in the springtime, there is landslides coming, threatening sometimes also the irrigation canals. So we are working together with the government to identify those risks that are aggravated through climate change, because more extreme weather events become more frequent with climate change, and especially in the spring when the snow melts, we see that, right? So also tackling the climate change aspect and the resilience of the infrastructure we're building will be important in both of those areas to help Uzbekistan really to create that green and technology-enabled infrastructure for tomorrow.
No, thank you. I'm going to have His Excellency wrap. But listening to you, I'm reminded of something we often say at the Milken Institute, which is, you know, you might have a great strategy or an idea for a specific project, but sometimes if you don't have capital, it just stays a great strategy or an idea for a specific project. And so as AIIB works to mobilize capital, clearly it needs to be a blend of both sovereign, you know, guaranteed assistance, but also mobilizing the non-sovereign, the private sector out there. And really, I mean, for me, one of the goals of this panel was that hopefully someone listens, share this link, and then people will think about, you know, Uzbekistan. You know, I'm intrigued by what you said, but I got to see if it's really true. I've got to come visit. Your Excellency, if you could bring us to a close and share, as you listen to all this, what is your closing message, your thoughts about a beautiful nation moving forward? What do you want people to know?
Thank you very much. Just we are out of time. 2 points. First, I would like to appreciate AIIB for the support which is provided to Uzbekistan in transforming our country, make it more attractive for foreign capital as well. So we are looking forward to the expansion of our cooperation, doing more, as we discussed today, doing more in PPPs and blending financing. And second point, would like to stress that the government is committed to continue the reforms to make Uzbekistan as best destination for foreign capital in the region. And I'm sure that together with MDBs and specifically with the AIIB, we will be able to succeed to introduce market-based principles in power sector and water sector. And again, I would like to repeat what my colleagues mentioned, that we offer companies, infrastructure companies, investors to come to Uzbekistan to participate in the large-scale transformation programs, projects that we offer, and would like to reiterate again that the government will create all conditions to make sure that your investments in Uzbekistan are safe and successful. And I hope that we will be able to announce new deals between Uzbekistan and companies who are participating today in this hall or listening us through video, that will be announcing new projects, new deals during the next annual meeting in Samarkand in Uzbekistan, 2024. Thank you.
Beautiful. A big hand for our panel and everyone. Uzbekistan 1 year from now. Thank you all.